Okay, gentlemen, we are on. Chairman, if you want to just greet us.
All right, thank you, Glenn. It is 9 o'clock. This is the Monday, February the 12th meeting of the Tennessee Auctioneer Commission. Before we get started, we do have a new member to the commission, Mr. Randy Lowe. If we take just a moment and let him introduce himself to us.
My name is Randy Lowe. I'm with Alvis & Lowe Auction Company. We're located in Clinton, Tennessee. We mainly specialize in real estate, personal property, estates. Just proud to be here and hope to be able to add something to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. If we may, we'll just begin the meeting with the notice of meeting. Notice of the February 12th, 2018 meeting of the Auctioneer Commission was posted to the Auctioneer Commission. Yes, sir. We'll do. If we can follow that up, we'll go and do the roll call right now. How about that? That sounds perfect. Jeff Morse.
Yes, I'm here.
Adam Lewis.
Here.
John Thorpe.
Here.
Ron Coyer.
Here.
And Randy Lowe.
Here.
Thanks, sir. Notice of the February 12th, 2018 meeting of the Auctioneer Commission was posted to the Auctioneer Commission website on February 5th, 2018. We've got our roll call out of the way, so we'll just we'll move on to the agenda. Was there any amendments to the agenda or order?
And I believe we have an amendment.
Yes,
to
Mr. Chairman, if you would, I'd like to add a representative or representatives from the Tennessee Auctioneers Association. They're going to be here today to talk about some of the legislative updates the legislation that's being implemented and presented, and I'd like to discuss that and add that to the agenda right after the legislative update.
Sounds perfect. We can do that. Okay.
Any other additions?
Does that need to be voted on?
Do we have a motion to accept it as amended?
Yeah.
Second.
All right.
Motion made by Commissioner Morris, second by Commissioner Lewis. Any discussion on the updated agenda? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Agenda has been approved. Minutes.
I trust that everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes. Is there any edits or any revisions there that we'd like to add or discuss? It was our last meeting in October.
I had a couple of questions I want to ask. I wasn't here about when I inquired about the notices being mailed out. Is that something that we are going to continue doing, or everything's good on that?
Yes. They get mailed out about 60 days in advance.
If you would, speak into your mic.
They get mailed out about 60 days in advance.
And another question before we do is about the newsletter. I inquired about that. What's the status on that?
We're actually going to cover that in the director's report. So you're tracking right on. So we'll dive into that.
Okay.
The technical glitches, have they been taken care of on the mailing? Do you still have any issues with those?
Folks who are actually using the online system seem to be getting through pretty okay. And our customer service folks have been sort of fine-tuned as to how to help auctioneers specifically with, their specific problems. Most of them are trying them on little devices, where they don't see the whole screen. So they have, with a proper monitor, usually no trouble.
Need a motion and a second for the minutes.
So moved.
Commissioner Morris moves approval of the minutes.
Second.
Commissioner Collier seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. It's unanimous. Education request.
If you look on your iPads, I tried to delineate it according to provider, and so just to kind of break it up so it's not one continuous document. So 3A through 3E there, we've got 3 different providers: Nashville Auction School, then Cornerstone, the National Flood Services. So we can just take them in the order if you like.
Okay, 3A on the Nashville Auction School. The commission.
I reviewed this application. This is a course on ethics and escrow, which I think is germane to the auction industry as it is today, and I move that we approve that course.
Commissioner Morris moves approval.
Second.
Commissioner Lewis seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Unanimous. 3B.
Like me to continue on that. Again, Nashville Auction School is presenting a course on advanced bid calling. This this is kind of a trend going around the country where they have advanced bid calling summits where they can learn and expand their trade. And I think this is a very appropriate course, and they'll do a great job. So I've moved that we approve that course as well.
Mr. Morris moves approval.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lewis. Any further discussion on 3B? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Unanimous. 3C.
Now here we have 6 courses, so you may want to have to break those up individually, or if they're all acceptable to the commission as well, we can do that in
I
one.
was trying to reduce some research. Who is Cornerstone? Do you have any background on them?
Beyond their biographical, no, just what they provided. That first, I guess, or second page there, James Drury, their main instructor, his formal education.
Went to Reppert's. I just don't know whether if they're doing these in other states, or I know they're big in Illinois.
They've he's got several other states there. Let me take a look.
Alabama, North Carolina, Illinois, South Carolina, Wisconsin, Kentucky.
Online. Part 1, communication part 2. I'm not sure what that.
Online only.
They're all on the line.
They're all online. Yeah. Problem with them if anybody wants to make a motion on it.
And a motion.
I make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Collier moves we approve all 6, or you want to do them separate? Any objection to doing them all as a group? Commissioner Collier moves we approve all 6 courses. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowe. Any further discussion? All in favor of approval of all 6 courses, 3C, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. 3D.
Now for the National Flood Services, I'm not familiar with them, so I called over there to get a response and just to get an idea of what was the intent, because initially I could see where that would be maybe real estate, but wasn't quite sure how it connected or what their intent was for Auctioneer in particular, unless it's for the auctioneer that's also the broker. I think that's probably. Of course, I'm having to surmise, not having spoken with the individual contact person there, having not received any correspondence in return. But imagine that's the only way I could see that they would be going with those 2 courses.
I'm not sure who they're going to market that course to in this state. At Germain, other than you're right, from a real estate standpoint.
Understanding flood maps is the first one, and the second one there is private flood insurance versus the NFIP. So you're looking at floodplains, and I mean, obviously, if you're a real estate broker and auctioneer, selling a piece of real estate, then that potentially, but that's that's going to be a small cross section of most of our licensees.
I'm a fan of this course, or these 2 courses.
You've got people that have an auction house and sell just personal property. They could just take this course. It's really not going to do Tennessee any good. They're not taking a course that's really pertinent to what they're selling. But I'm with Jeff. I'm not really a fan.
It wouldn't be mandatory, of course. It'd be by choice, but you'd be right.
Right. That's just another way to get some point.
Bill the commission.
Unless somebody makes a motion to approve it, I don't think it gets approved. To disapprove it?
Deny. We can make a motion to deny. That would be fine. Just so we.
I'd make that motion.
Okay, on both
Mr.
of
Morris moves we do not approve 3D from the National Flood Service.
3D and 3E, right?
3D and 3E.
Correct.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Commissioner Lowe seconds. All in favor of not approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show unanimous, not approved. 4.
That moves us into the director's report. We'll open up the budget there. And as you know, we just ended, didn't just end, but it's the first time we have an opportunity to look at those numbers for fiscal year 2017. So that's what we're looking at here is that first, it's also doing a 4-year comparison so we can track all that, see where our final reserve is. And then right on the heels of that, we'll have the education fund, and then we'll do just our current budget for our current trending. So we'll take the first page so you can get an idea of the overall general health of the commission. And right dead center, you'll see where it says grand total. There's all lines going through there, right dead center of that fiscal year. And in that, you'll have you got your grand total of expenditures of $92,000. Then you add the additional right below that of cost backs, where you have additional expenditures of $63,000. Total expenditures of roughly $156,000. So now we have our and those are the expenditures, but then you have revenue a little further down, net revenue of $230,000, giving us a fiscal year balance of $74,000, roughly $74,000, which is a pretty on par with the 3 years prior. Gives us we had a prior fiscal year balance of $340,000, which brings our reserve balance to a total of $414,000, roughly. So that's
Is that our replacement reserve part of it, or is that just our operating reserve?
that's total reserve.
Okay. I know that I had the opportunity to be at the sunset hearing for the Auctioneers Commission this past Wednesday, and one thing that committee is really looking at are these reserves, and by statute we're only supposed to have $150,000 on our reserve balance. Now I know we're talking about doing some things about expanding the newsletter and some expenses coming up, but we think we need to really look at our reserve balance to make sure we don't get too out of whack, because their big focus, and rightfully so, is, and some of them, the other boards are way up there. They're in the millions of dollars. We're not going to ever be in that position because we just don't have that many members. But they're looking at all these reserves, and if we're charging more fees than we need in order to maintain our reserves, we need to make sure we look at those to make sure that we're staying in line. And if there's an opportunity to reduce the fees on renewals and new licensees, then we need to take every opportunity to do that to make sure we're staying in line with that. So I don't know if the staff wants to look at that and make a proposal to us in terms of reducing our fees that we're charging, so that we're not building up a huge fund just for the sake of building up a huge fund. Because, quite honestly, the number of complaints that get filed against that fund are almost non-existent because people don't know how to do it. And they have to go through they have to exhaust the legal system, they have to exhaust the auctioneer's net worth, and then they come to get money out of our fund if they still are not satisfied by that point. So I don't even know the last time the fund would ever paid a complaint. So we need to maybe look at that. But if we're just building up money to build up money, then we're in jeopardy of upsetting the legislature, and we need to make sure that we're keeping our fees down where we can stay in business, but not jeopardize our statute requirement of $150,000 reserve. And so I would like to get the staff to look at that and maybe come back to this board and make a recommendation as to what we ought to be doing.
It's very prophetic of you, because matter of fact, the director of accounting is doing just that. He's been looking at thresholds for different programs to include the auctioneers. So you're right on target with what he's doing right now. We could ask him to, of course, do an update to so you could track or at least get a temperature and get some sort of idea of what those thresholds are and what they have in mind. But they're tracking all of our programs now, and some of the other programs, they've already come to us with some proposals in that regard. Obviously, each commission or board has certain statutory limits, which you described, that we have to adhere to as a minimum. We can't fall below those things. But then they have thresholds as far as ceilings as well that we have to look at when they start approaching that based on our trending analysis. Then we have to make decisions then as well to keep that from extending beyond I think acceptable limits as you described. So yes, sir, we can do that. We can reach out to Director of Accounting then and see if he could at least talk to those points directly to the commission, if that would so be your will.
I don't think there's an auctioneer in the state that would be upset with it getting their fever due a little bit. So.
No,
I do
not.
think that Bill's already looking into the $250 figures upon initial and renewal to see if we could reduce one or eliminate one after the sunset hearing. So he's already.
Fair.
You're welcome.
If we could move to the next one, we've got basically the education fund as well, tracking that fiscal year as well as we go across. As you know, statutorily we have an education fund. And as you see, we have a grand total balance there of $277,000 as well. And we're going to have that discussion here pretty short. Well, we can have that discussion actually right now. We'll talk about the newsletter, because those come together.
Right.
You know, initially we talked about industry mandates and weren't necessarily a part of what regulatory boards or the commission itself would participate in, only because it's best left with the industry experts. However, upon second look at the education fund, we realized the funds are there, and so we want to do something proactive. You know, and if it is the will of the commission, and it has been expressed by the will of the commission to do a newsletter, then obviously that's one way to attack that. So we've already worked on a request for proposal, and that'll be probably, I'd say, submitted. They're telling me just by process that'll be submitted by the end of February. Probably they're saying February 26th. That's not a hard deadline, but you know, as these things move, if it's on track to move and set, probably about February 26th. And if any time after that, wouldn't be much, a day or two after that, but we're looking at somewhere about that range. We've modeled after the contract we've done before, putting out there for bid. And so we'll just we'll see where we go from there, and of course we'll update the commission as those bids come in. Won't be handled in our office. Contracts on the 8th floor, they handle all of that, but they'll review each proposal or a request for proposal that's been responded to, and we'll update the commission then. Does anyone have any questions as far regard to that?
No, I'd like to see that moved up as fast as we can. I do know by being uniquely positioned in Memphis, I'm a member of Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama, all of those associations. And Alabama and Arkansas put out stellar newsletters. I mean, they're really high quality, good content that's mailed directly to the auctioneer, and sort of embarrassing that Tennessee doesn't do anything. And so I'd love to see us have a high quality, you know, really nice looking, professional and on point type newsletter that could go out to all auctioneers, especially in light of some of the silly complaints that we're getting, as we're going to go through those here in a few minutes. And as an educational tool to these guys that are licensed, they need to understand what they can and cannot do. And so we need to be on point.
That was Arkansas, and you said Mississippi?
Arkansas and Alabama.
Alabama. Okay, I was way off. All right.
I just like to say too, when all this came about the newsletter, you know, we were told that it could be done in house or online. And if you look at North Carolina, Kentucky, and several other states, they do a real nice newsletter online, email it to all auctioneers. And that's what, when the vote came down, and Jeff didn't vote for it, let me say that. But that's what I was led to believe, that we were going to do it in-house or do it online. So and he may not be able to, but I mean, if we're going to put it out for bids, I say send it back to Wendell and, you know, let him just continue doing it like he was. I mean, that's why I voted. And if you know, if we're not going to do it like we were told it's going to be done in-house, why, I say just let him continue doing it, or
Resources for the in-house. At the time, there was resources, but then those resources have since left with certain personnel, and then of course with the centralization as well. That then a lot of that has since expired. So there's no longer the resource in-house, and with the education fund, it just makes sense now to put it out for bid. So that's the direction we're going. I did look at Kentucky because I remember you saying that at the last meeting as well, and it was well done. And but it is in-house, and so for them bidding, that wouldn't
Well, even if you had a third-party provider to do an online educational tool or online newsletter, it would be cheaper than printing and mailing. So that might be another option for us.
And it's like you're reading my mind, because that's how we wrote our RFP, was we're going to do it all online. It's going to be because these days everyone's got email, and
Right.
they're going to get it quicker at their iPhone than they would a letter in the mail. So we're just going to do an email back, and it is quite a bit cheaper. But it's just a better delivery system too,
Right.
and the information the fast is changing all the time. We want to give them the most current information, and if things work out well, another thing we put in the RFP was to have our first newsletter by December. Now I don't can't make any promises, but that's what we asked for. So we'll see how, and that all things once approved, done, reviewed, set, released, December. That's kind of what we're shooting for. All right, unless anyone had any more questions on that, we'll just keep firing away through the budget. Now we'll look at our trending for this fiscal year. We'll look at this month, then we'll look at total health. Okay, so right now this month we've got a total revenue of $13,000 roughly, and then we got total expenditures of about $24,000, which puts us in a net deficit of $11,000. Now, this isn't alarming to anyone. It's just this is when we pay out the Nashville Auction School for their seminar that we commission them to do. So we have about a $15,000 bill there that hits about periodically when they produce that seminar. We had that last year, we had that this year, so that's not a surprise to anybody. So that's where that number is coming from there. Now I would be surprised if we had another one like that the following month, but on this month, that was the Nashville Auction School is what that is.
That on that line says Edison expenditures.
Yes, sir. No, that's just that chart that you saw. The first two. Well, let's go to the first chart. Edison expenditures includes all those type of items as well. It can be and primarily payroll in addition to some of those items. So that's what you're looking at there. For the year, you've got total revenue thus far for this fiscal year is roughly $91,000, and then total expenses $73,000. So we still have a net surplus of $18,000. So we're tracking about where we need to be. Anyone have any questions on that? We covered the budget report, hit the newsletter. That worked out pretty seamlessly since we were already at the education report. So as far as sunset hearing updates, I believe Mr. Morris did a pretty good job of touching on that already. But unless you want to expand on that more, I didn't really have much to add to that, having not been there myself.
It was fairly brief. They had each of the boards come up there, and again, the overall theme was, why do we have such large reserves? Are you looking at doing things to, cut expenses or fees? We don't need to be in the reserve building business, basically. And they were looking at that, and they were just going through the motions pretty much for the rest of it. But I mean, our part of it took less than 5 minutes. But it wasn't we got extended for another 4 years, I think.
Got 6 years.
6 years? Was it 6?
Real
Some of them were 4,
Real
some of them
Estate
were
Commission
6.
got 4.
So we're good for another 6 years.
All right, good. Unless I think that pretty much sums it up. It was pretty much the budget, and they were looking at the money that this time around, and that's typical too with the sunset hearing. Got to make sure it's sustainable, and that we're not in the business of making money. It's got to be sustainable. And so once we
Well, I will say this: the other thing that came out of it, not on our commission but on others, and we got to pay close attention to this. There was some boards allow anonymous complaints, some don't. Our board does. I know there's some of the boards they don't they don't like anonymous complaints. The members of the Senate that were on that committee didn't really like anonymous complaints. I know we do it on our board, and we might want to take a look at that because with their complaint, their problem with anonymous complaints, they feel like it's just auctioneers turning other auctioneers in. I mean, they said that verbatim at the hearing, and we see that to be true from the complaints that we see. We're more or less policing ourselves, and their position is, and we might want to take a look at this and be up to the board to consider it, but not allowing anonymous complaints, because if you're not going to step up and file a complaint in your name, then you don't need to be turning a complaint in. So that's something we might want to take a look at or be sensitive to, especially since the Senate they don't like it.
Mr. Morris, you're scaring me because that was on my list too.
Oh, okay.
That was a perfect segue. So we'll just talk about anonymous claims since you've introduced the topic. In the past, we typically wouldn't refer anonymous complaints if there was no information. Obviously, we have to have information to act on. If someone's just, for a lack of a better term, what you were talking about earlier, just tattling, but there's nothing to trace it back to. We can't, we have no witness. We have nothing to go on. Then those were just never referred. And so what we want to do, though, is to track that just for volume, just to see how many of those do we actually get, because we're not tracking that volume. So one thing that we'd like to do administratively, if it be the will of the commission, is to open up the anonymous complaint and then close it if there's no information to act on, and just do that all in-house. And that way we're not referring them anyway, but we want to open it. But once it's open, then we have to have authority by the commission to close it. So what we're saying is we'd like to open it so we can track it, but we still not refer it, obviously, unless there's anything there. So if that would be the will of the commission, we'd need a motion in that regard to allow us to administratively to close those anonymous complaints. Again, anonymous only. If there's information to act on, we're going to continue to act on those complaints like we always have. But if there's nothing to act on, then we want to open them and close them so we can track the volume. And if that would be the will of the commission, I would ask for a motion in that regard.
Sure. Can we bring that up in new business?
Yes, sir. That'd be fine.
Do you need any approval on the budget report?
No, sir. That was just for your information.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we may just touch on this procedurally, but being that it's the beginning of the year, we'll want to decide if we want to continue using Robert's Rule of Order as well as our process. We've already had our elections of officers. That'll carry us through the entire year, so we won't have to do that again this year, but we'll probably need to do that as well. So if I may add that to new business as well, we'll do that. Brings us to legal then.
Chairman, if you would, can we rearrange that? We'll go ahead and do the legislative update in the interest of our guests, and then we can get into legal after that.
Any objection?
I was going to say, it says it on legal too, but since they're here, I'll let them talk about the legislation instead of me.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Like somebody to approach the podium then.
All right. Mr. Allen.
Morning. My name is David Allen. I'm the current president of the Tennessee Auctioneer Association, and in just a second I'm going to ask Ms. Addison Russell to come up and speak directly about the legislation that's being proposed in the House and in the Senate, specifically House Bill 2036. The reason why I'm up here to let her then subsequently talk about it is I want to give you all some background as to how we've gotten to this point. As you all are all aware, there's been a lot of hand-wringing about the direction of the auction industry as it particularly relates to online auctions. We had our December winter convention in the first weekend in December and addressed this problem with the membership. We indicated that we were open to ideas. We wanted to hear everybody's opinion on how we felt like we should be represented as the TAA and which direction we should go in terms of regulating or non-regulating online auctions. The consensus came back that the TAA feels like online auction regulation is a must. It is something that is not currently being adequately addressed, we believe. It is the direction in which the industry is moving, and yet there is no real tangible oversight of auctions that are considered to be online extended time auctions. And by that I mean an auction that can extend the bidding process by simply an additional bid being placed in the last few minutes of the proposed closing time. We feel like that's no different than just an auctioneer standing up in front of a crowd and asking for, are there any more bids? And so in one instance, in a live auction, you have oversight, you have regulation, you have education. In another instance, through a computer, you have absolutely none of that. And so we hired a lobbyist, Miss Addison Russell and her firm that she works for, to help us to craft legislation which we believe would address that. We also recognize that there were other issues related to the auction industry which needed to be addressed. We got feedback that the apprenticeship program and its process needs to be looked at, that perhaps it's too cumbersome, that it doesn't perhaps address the needs of, I think it was created, 40, 50 years ago, and technology and travel and all of the other new inventions of how we communicate don't make some of the things unnecessary that currently exist in the apprentice law. So at this particular point in time, we have a House bill that's being sponsored by Mr. Mark Gravitt, Representative Gravitt, who is also an auctioneer out of Chattanooga, and the Senate sponsor is Mr. Yeager. And between the two of them, we've come up with some legislation. This, for all intents and purposes, won't be the final version of what we're wanting. It's sort of a fluid understanding of what we're trying to get passed. But we feel like the elephant in the room is online auction and the regulation of it by the auction industry and the Tennessee Auction Commission. And our goal is to try to ultimately get some type of understanding about who can conduct an online auction and who can't. And at this time, I'm going to let Ms. Russell.
Good morning, I'm Addison Russell, and as you said, I represent the Tennessee Auctioneers Association on the Hill. David did a great job going through the bill and giving you a little background. We're talking about House Bill 2036, Senate Bill 2081. I don't know if you have that in front of you. I'm just going to give you a brief rundown, kind of section by section. The first section is the association voted to change the word apprentice auctioneer to affiliate auctioneer. They did this to kind of streamline it more with the real estate titles. It was just a preference for them, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Secondly, they're going to reduce the apprenticeship period from 2 years to 1 year. This is because, as I'm sure you have seen, the climate on the Hill is to do less regulation, and there has been a big movement that I know that you all are heard of, is the Right Turn to Living Act. And so this is the association recognizing certain barriers to entry and trying to make it easier for get in the auction industry. So we're going to reduce that apprenticeship period from 2 years to 1 year. Further, it's a commission rule that you have to be a licensed auctioneer for 2 years before you can take on any apprentices. This legislation would eliminate that, and then once you received your auction license, you could take on as many apprentices as you like, rather than just the 3 limit that the commission has now. He did mention the online auction portion, and it's my understanding that the Auctioneer Commission currently interprets the statute to say a time listing is a listing with a fixed time, ending, and date. But I know that there's been some pushback on that from lawyers. I'm one of myself. So we just want to clarify that by defining time listing. So we're going to define time listing as an auction with a fixed ending time and date that does not extend based on bidder activity. So if you're doing extended bid auctions, then you are no longer fall in that exemption under the auctioneer statute. The last portion creates an exemption for any exchange of goods conducted online by a company which is publicly traded and primarily sells automobiles. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them for you.
Questions?
No, I think the bill does exactly what we're trying to get done, and I applaud the TAA for doing it and hiring you to get it done. We've been wrestling with this on this commission for ever since I've been on here, and as you will see in the legal report today, it's an online auction and everybody's having a complaint. We have to dismiss it because we have no jurisdiction over it, and I don't like that, but that's just the way the law is written. And if this will help get it done and we can get the votes, I'm all for it. So, I don't know if y'all would like for us to adopt this or give us a stamp of approval from this board, but if that's what you're looking for, I'll be glad to make that in the form of a motion, let this board vote on it.
That's always appreciated. So we definitely welcome that.
Commissioner Morris moves that this board endorse
Second.
this bill.
Second.
Commissioner Collier seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of endorsing this bill, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you all for your hard work.
Appreciate all you guys being here. Commissioner Bobby? Come on.
Sure.
Step up to the mic and introduce yourself and be on record.
I'm Bobby Colson. I got a call from Clive Anderson the other day. Y'all, I'm sure some of y'all know Clive or whatever. Clive is 80 some odd years old, and he has license number 1. His dad had license number 1, and he was concerned that whenever he retires or quits or whatever, of course he's been kind of out of the business now for several years anyway, that he doesn't want anyone to get a hold of that license number 1 and abuse the number. And so I just kind of wanted to say that, and I've talked to, I think, Dennis about it some, and I don't think you can even do that anymore as far as recycling numbers or anything.
Nobody's going to get an old number, so we don't recycle.
That's what I told Bobby, and I don't.
It's the way the software is designed.
Exactly.
You can't
And
recycle.
he asked me,
It will die with him.
there's not anything he needs to do or anything,
No.
he can just go on.
No, he's good.
Thank
at-
you very
like I said,
much.
when he passes away, that'll be the end of number 1.
Hire that jersey.
Yeah, well, that number will be retired. I think Jasper Jones was number 4 or something like that. I don't think anybody picked up his number when he passed away either. So,
Are you ready for the legal report? If there's no objection, if we take about a 5-minute recess.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Ready for the legal report?
Good morning. Would you like me to read verbatim the report, or did you have a chance to read it? How would you like me to proceed? I can paraphrase it for you.
I think the paraphrasing would be good because
That
some
would
of
be,
these are
that
kind of
would be
long.
great. Okay, great. I'm on board with that. Okay, we'll start with number 1, which is 2017058981. The complainant is the owner of a licensed auction gallery in Tennessee, and the complainant sent in a copy of an advertisement, which was in a Tennessee City's newspaper, dated September 3rd, 2017. And the advertisement states, quote, representing estates and important collections for over 25 years. And then it further states, quote, invitation to consign estates auction October 14th through 15th. And then it includes a contact phone number, email, and website address. The advertisement also states, contact us today to receive a complimentary expert valuation, and mentions a 25% buyer's premium. And then it lists a Louisiana auctioneer license number. So it doesn't mention where this estates auction is happening, that it gives dates for. It doesn't give a time or anything. It really, to me, just looks like an invitation to consign. And the respondent responded that they're an auction house in New Orleans. They state they don't conduct any auctions or execute any contracts in Tennessee. They stated that they consulted with their attorneys and believe they're not subject to the rules of the Tennessee Auctioneer Commission, confirming that they have an active license with the Louisiana Auctioneer Board. They felt like this advertisement was in compliance with the Louisiana rules, since they stated their Louisiana license number. And I felt that there was evidence in this advertisement that shows the respondent is engaged in unlicensed activity, because the advertisement is an open invitation to consign and would probably lead consumers in Tennessee to believe the respondent's able to conduct auctions in Tennessee. I felt it was a vague, unclear, and misleading advertisement because it doesn't state where and what time the auction would take place, and doesn't state that they're not licensed in Tennessee, even though it states they're licensed in Louisiana. But I don't feel like this is something that they're going to continue to do now that they've been notified. So my recommendation was just a letter of warning about the licensing requirements in Tennessee.
I read this complaint, and this goes back to all the things that we've been talking about. You know, when you're trying to do online auctions and you're asking people from Tennessee to send your goods to Louisiana to do an online auction, it was not clear in that advertising that that's what they were wanting to do. And I wanted to make it very clear to them that they can't ask people in Tennessee to send their goods down unless they know that they're having to ship them to Louisiana for a sale there. And I don't know whether, if you're asking people in Tennessee, whether you can ask them that or not without being licensed in this state. I just don't know what our law says about that.
Right. I read over the statutes and the rules when I read over this complaint, and I couldn't find anything that clearly said you couldn't, but I just felt like this was just a misleading, vague. They could have done a better job making it clear.
Again, other states are, I know in Pennsylvania it's this way, if you ask somebody in Pennsylvania to consign it no matter where you are, then you're under the laws of Pennsylvania law. Now, Tennessee's not that clear, and I don't know whether that needs to be looked at from the standpoint of this legislation that we're doing. But again, the more online auctions are, the more they're trying to get people to send stuff, and whether, I don't care what it is, whether it be a car, a watch, or a ring or whatever, then they ought to be licensed in this state if they're going to ask people in this state to consign their goods and contract with Tennessee residents.
Right, and put it in a Tennessee newspaper.
Right, exactly. I think the letter is all you can do at this point, and I would agree with that, and I would make that in the form of a motion that we'd send them a letter, but I'd want to make sure that they understand that they need to be clear in their advertising where the auction will be held, and whether it be an online auction only, and would be held in the state of Louisiana under Louisiana law, and that they would be consigning under those conditions.
I can definitely add that wording to the letter of warning.
Commissioner Morris moves that we concur with council's recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowe. I just say this, could we not have just had an investigator call them and say, hey, I've got some stuff in Tennessee I want to sell. Do you guys auctions here, and just see what they say? Then there wouldn't be, it'd be clear what their intentions were.
Yeah, we definitely could.
And we don't even technically have to have an investigator do that.
Yeah.
The legal department can make
Yeah,
those phone
anybody.
calls. So
Yeah, in the future, or I can do that unless you would want me to put this off until next month and try that first.
They already know our
Right,
now,
that's true.
so
I
it's-
would feel.
That's just a suggestion for the.
I will definitely handle it that way in the future. Thank you
Thank
for that.
Any further discussion? All in favor of concurring with council's recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The record show all members vote in favor. Number 2.
2017-062271. We opened this complaint administratively against respondent for advertising and conducting an absolute auction on April 22nd, 2017, because the advertisement did not list the auctioneer's name and license number. I spoke with the employees whose name was on the advertisement, and the employee worked for the trucking company that hired this licensed auctioneer. This was a one-time auction at the trucking company's warehouse that was about to be bulldozed. They wanted to clear it out. It's unclear to me who drafted this advertisement and whether or not the licensed auctioneer who conducted it even knew the advertisement was put out there without his name on it. We dismissed the complaint against the trucking company, and the commission voted, this was in September, to open this complaint against the licensed auctioneer. So we sent the copy of this complaint to the respondent. We have not gotten a response from that respondent. My recommendation is a letter of warning because this was a one-time auction. I talked to the employee who hired the respondent. The employee seemed to take full responsibility for this the problem with the advertisement. And the licensed auctioneer was licensed for 22 years without any discipline and is no longer licensed, has not tried to renew. Since I haven't talked to him, I don't know if he plans to, but I believe he's retired based on what the employee from the trucking company states. So that's why my recommendation was a letter of warning.
I can say this, if he's been in business 22 years, he knows that if he conducts an auction, he has to have a contract with that firm, and he has to be the one to advertise that auction and conduct that auction, and that he can't just, I applaud the employee for stepping up and say, this is what we did, but it's really not his say. The auctioneer, you know, if a trucking company calls me, then I say, look, I got to run the advertiser, I got to put my license number, I have to run this auction. You know, I appreciate you guys trying to do it, but you can't do that on your own, not in this state. So I don't know what you do about it.
Jeff on this because, you know, he should have known what the rules were, so I think you need to do more than a letter if you can.
I don't know how you find a guy that's not licensed.
I don't either.
So
I was worried about that.
But I would be watching this guy to see if he does try to renew, and then I would not renew his license. I can tell you that.
We can, I believe we can, I can amend my recommendation for a letter of warning and flag this complaint. If he does try to renew, we can revisit it. And then, can we do that, Sarah? If we send a letter of warning, can we flag it as well? If the respondent tries to renew and bring this up again, and could we issue a civil penalty if the commission voted on it in order for him to renew it?
I don't know how you would find a guy that's not licensed, but anyway, whatever we can do to make the auctioneer aware of what's going on, and the trucking company, to make them both aware, you know, letters to both of them, and to flag this guy's account and ask him to I wouldn't renew his license based on this complaint, but that's me. But I would make that in form of a motion.
Read your full motion there.
Yeah, we signed a letter to both the auctioneer and the trucking company to let them understand that the auctioneer was to have a contract with them to sell the goods and to advertise as a licensed auctioneer, and that the trucking company cannot, if they're going to hire an auctioneer, they can't just have their own auction without that auctioneer conducting it. And to flag the auctioneer's account and to not renew his license if he tries to renew it.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Commissioner Collier seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. 3.
2017063-521. The complainant is a resident of Michigan, and she states that she and her husband were interested in a home that respondent was selling through an online auction. The complainant bid twice on this property during the auction, but their bid did not meet the reserve price. So after the close of the auction, the respondent contacted the complainant and asked if they would pay the reserve price, and they declined. So the respondent then called the seller and asked if he wanted to reduce the reserve price, and he offered to sell it for, I think, $3,500 less than the reserve price. So the respondent called the complainant back. The complainant's husband said, okay, we'll go ahead. Those were his words. Then the respondent sent paperwork to the complainant and her husband to follow through with this transaction and purchase the property. Once the complainant and her husband received this paperwork, they decided they didn't want to go through with it. They didn't really contact the respondent. The respondent had to contact them. And the complainant alleges that the respondent was hostile and yelling at her, saying that the seller could sue her and her husband. The complainant didn't provide any evidence or documentation to support the allegations made in the complaint, and then 2 days after filing the complaint, asked to withdraw the complaint. The respondent confirms that they made 2 bids, that he did call them after he talked with the seller. He felt that they agreed to buy it for that price. And then he denies that he was ever hostile or yelled at the complainant, but he did confirm that he informed them the seller could possibly sue them for not following through with the transaction. He made it very clear that he was never going to sue them. He had no problem with this, no issue with it. He doesn't feel like he did anything wrong, but he wants to be informed if he did commit a violation. Counsel considers the fact that the complainant asked to withdraw this complaint, didn't provide any further information once she received the copy of the respondent's response. She said she was going to speak with a lawyer. We never heard from her again. The respondent has no disciplinary history, and I didn't find any evidence that the respondent violated any statutes or rules, so I recommend dismissal.
There was no violation of the law, but the one thing that the auctioneer does need to understand is that a bidder may withdraw a bid at any time, especially on a real estate transaction where it requires a written contract. They never signed the contract, no matter what they said. And, for him to say, well, you registered to bid, why would you bid, and then not go through? They have every right to do that. And we run into that in our business all the time. Until they sign that sales contract, we ain't got nothing. So he needs to understand that a bidder may withdraw a bid at any time, especially on a reserve auction, and they're trying to talk them into raising their bid. No. So I don't think the party did anything wrong, but they can sue all day long, but they'll never prevail in that case.
Make a motion to accept legal's advice.
Second.
Mr. Collier moves we concur with legal's recommendation to dismiss. Commissioner Lewis seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. 4.
2017063-411. The complainant states the respondent was brought in to auction off his personal collectibles at his store that was closed, and that the auction was supposed to be held in that building. And the complainant alleges the respondent began taking items away from that building to the respondent's, auction house located in another city. The complainant alleges the respondent took 400 of his high-priced Barbies and sold them from $5 to $15. He alleges the complainant took a couch that he'd just reupholstered for $1,500 and sold it for $50. Complainant's mad about the $1,000 invoice the respondent has sent to him, but complainant hasn't paid it. And the respondent is currently paying to store all of the complainant's items that did not sell, which I believe is quite a lot of items. The complainant did not provide any documentation or proof to support any of the allegations made in his complaint. The respondent confirms that he was hired after the complainant had originally hired an unlicensed auction firm, that auction happened but nobody showed up. And that the respondent discussed the issue of it might be better to take your items to the auction house where I've had success, in the past, and that the complainant agreed to that, or he would have never moved anything. The complainant let him move things. It took multiple trips to do it. And the respondent denies that he was not supposed to sell this couch. He had no idea that it was supposedly reupholstered. It was in the office that was closed. It was just used for customers to sit on. It looked like it had normal wear and tear, and he sold it for what he could get for it. He states he sold a few of the Barbies and then told the complainant, I don't think that these are going to sell. The complainant said, well, maybe we'll have better luck at Christmas. Store them for me. The respondent states that he's continuing to store these items and hopes the complainant will eventually pick them up. Since it's costing him quite a bit of money, the complainant hasn't paid him anything for moving all this stuff from one place to another, for boxing it up. But the respondent provided copies of 5 checks showing that he's paid the complainant for all items that were sold. So I didn't find any evidence the respondent violated any statutes or rules, and I recommend dismissal.
My question in this case is, where's the auction contract? Where's the contract that says he's to sell these items, and where he was to sell them and what time and place? Did they ever provide you a copy of that?
Will you look at it for me? I'm pretty sure.
That's a question I have. After the first auction, it says they had a contract to do that, and then that was unsuccessful. So that contract would be finished. They would need a new contract to move those items and sell them at another date, I would think. It says complainant verbally agreed to this plan. So
neither the complainant nor the respondent provided a copy of the contract, and I didn't question it because the complainant had every opportunity to rebut the response of the respondent saying that the complainant verbally agreed to it and all of the things that I summarized. So I didn't think it was necessary, since I saw the copies of the check showing payment.
Eric, it all gets back to that auction contract. Everything has to be in writing. You know, what you're going to sell, where you're going to sell it, what your fees are going to be. So if he's following the verbiage in the contract, then he's okay. If he doesn't have a contract at all, then he's got a problem. So I think there's maybe a little bit more to this story. I don't know.
can we postpone this for another meeting and see if we can get a contract from them?
Absolutely. I'll request one right away. And then I'll
Somebody-
represent it with that information.
If so, move for that.
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Morris moves we table this till next meeting.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lewis. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Unanimous. Number 5.
2017068-191. The complainant is a licensed auctioneer. He filed this complaint, which included a copy of a flyer that he states was dropped off at his office. He doesn't state who dropped the flyer off or when it was dropped off. And the advertisement states it was for an auction to be held on October 14th, 2017. It states the auction would be presented by respondent's auctioneer firm. The advertisement provides respondent's auctioneer license number. It does not mention respondent's name or his firm's license number. The only references to respondent in the advertisement is the number that I just stated, and the name that I guess the respondent's auctioneer license number and yeah, that's it. That's the only reference. The advertisement is very lengthy, very wordy, and the complainant drafted this advertisement, did not ask the respondent to review it, did not even tell him he was making the advertisement. The respondent states he knows this complainant because they have, quote, not a pleasant history, and feels that this complaint is just a childish, vindictive attempt to cause respondent and his company grief and aggravation. The respondent states the flyer was produced and distributed by his client, this liquidation company who was having this auction or sale, attempting to make the local community aware of the newly opened business and the fact that he was conducting a sale to introduce his company to the area. And the respondent's client did not inform or request approval from the respondent regarding the creation and distribution of this flyer. Respondent only knew of its existence when he got a copy of this complaint from our office. The respondent states the only consigner was the liquidation company itself, other than a handful of items owned by the respondent's auctioneer firm that were put in the sale at the request of the consigner. I didn't feel there was any evidence that the respondent knew about the flyer or had anything to do with using the flyer as an advertisement for the auction. The respondent's been licensed for over 15 years and has no disciplinary history, so my recommendation was dismissal.
I agree with your recommendation. Well, this is one thing the newsletter could greatly come in handy. If auctioneers need to make sure they school their clients that they just can't go out and start advertising and without them approving it, making sure it's legal. So I think that just goes to the point of newsletter.
Motion we accept legal's recommendation.
Have a motion that we concur with legal's recommendation and dismiss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowe. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Unanimous. Number 6.
2017068-261. This is the same complaint as the one I just summarized, and this respondent is the auctioneer firm. There's no additional information other than what I just summarized, so my recommendation was also dismissal.
Motion to accept legal's recommendation.
Second.
Commissioner Collier moves we dismiss this complaint. Commissioner Lewis seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Unanimous. Number 7.
2017068-771. So this matter involves the same complaint as the two that I just summarized, and the respondent in this case is the liquidation company that created and drafted and posted the advertisement and conducted this sale. And they responded to this complaint and confirmed that, yes, they indeed draft it, as I had summarized before. So I found evidence that the respondent used language in the flyer that would lead the public to believe they are involved and licensed to conduct auctions. And my recommendation was a letter of warning regarding unlicensed activity.
Motion we accept legal's counsel.
Commissioner Lewis moves we concur with legal's recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowe. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Unanimous. Number 8.
201707061. There was a complaint opened for the Motor Vehicle Commission that was the same complaint that's involved in this matter, and that matter was investigated by an investigator who went out and spoke with the respondent, the motor vehicle dealer, and that motor vehicle dealer confirmed everything that is in my summary here, and the investigator recommended dismissal of that complaint, which it was dismissed by the Motor Vehicle Commission. Basically, the complainant alleges that he went to this auction and it was represented to him that the vehicle he bid and purchased ran and drove, but the keys were not available in order for him to verify this alleged representation. He states if the keys had been available, he could see if the vehicle started, and it would have been apparent that the vehicle needed a new motor and was not, in fact, running and driving. The complainant does not provide any further details or documentation to support his allegations, and the respondent confirmed that they held this auction, states that it was made public knowledge at the beginning, before the auction started, that the information regarding the vehicles was believed to be true but was not guaranteed. All sales were final and the vehicles were being sold in as-is condition. The respondent feels the complainant was probably not present at the beginning of the auction to hear the information that he's stating he should have known. The respondent states the complainant purchased the vehicle with full knowledge it was a repossession because that information was on the window, written on the window, and the investigator confirmed that it was and sent us a picture showing that it said repo on the car. So my recommendation is a dismissal just based on the vague complaint, the lack of evidence provided, and the fact the investigator went out and the Motor Vehicle Commission dismissed it as well.
I have a little bit of an issue with this. This goes back to the credibility of the auction industry. I can tell you that if we know there's a defect in anything, we try to disclose that, make sure everybody knows it's disclosed. If they have a car that they say it's running and it is running, that's fine. If it doesn't run at all and you say it's running, then you got a problem. Anything made by the statement made by an auctioneer on the block needs to be an absolute truth, whether it be a chip in a piece of porcelain or it be, one owner, two owners, running, not running, battery, no battery. Those kind of statements from the block are everything, and people rely on an auctioneer to be truthful. This standing behind, I sold it as is. Well, so what? I mean, everybody understands that. But what you say on the block is, best thing an auctioneer says, I know nothing about this car, check it out. But if he stands up there and says it's running and it doesn't run, he's got a problem.
I don't think that I think that's just the complainant's allegation. The respondent says they never said that.
Okay.
So I don't have
There
proof.
should be an audio tape of that auction, and they can find out whether or not that was said or not. We audio tape every auction that we do, no matter where it is or what it is. So I don't know, but I don't know whether if you can prove whether he said it was running or not. But I'm telling you, if an auctioneer stands on a block and says certain things and makes certain claims about it, he better be able to back it up, good or bad.
Did you ask if it was taped?
Will you pull up that file? I believe I'm going to see what the investigator's reports states about that, because I feel like the investigator may have listened to it or had.
But I hear auctioneers all the time standing, but well, we sold it as is. You know what you bought. And give the guy's money back and resell the car and tell everybody it's not running. I mean, that's the fair thing to do.
Would you like us to go to the next one and come back after some?
Yes.
We'll come back.
She's going to
at
go
the
get
end.
the information I need.
All right, number 9.
2017071851. The complainant alleges the respondent is conducting weekly auctions on Fridays based on their Facebook posts and the advertisements stating such. And states they do not have a gallery license or a firm license, and they are unlicensed. The complainant provided a screenshot of a post on respondent's Facebook page stating that a consignment auction would take place on November 16th. There's another screenshot with a post advertising a toy auction on November 3rd, an on-site furniture auction, and a grocery auction on November 4th. The post stated there'd be no bidder fees, no reserves, that cash, credit, and approved checks would be accepted, that the items were guaranteed to work or their money back. There was a free raffle ticket offered to be won for a $50 gift certificate at the end of that auction on November 3rd. The complaint was sent out to an investigator, and the investigator went to the location and showed up for that November 3rd auction, and states that the auction was in process upon his arrival. The investigator confirmed that the licensed auctioneer referred to above and was in the process of conducting the auction, but states the respondent itself does not have a firm license. So the investigator spoke with the respondent's operator, and that operator confirmed that they don't have a firm license, stated to the investigator that he's been discussing the possibility of the licensed auctioneer transferring his firm license to the respondent's location or thinking about applying for his own firm license. He told the investigator he's been in contact with the commission and our licensing division to learn what he needs to do to comply with licensing requirements. He admitted that he's been operating at that location for a couple of months, so he was aware that he needed a license. So I found clear evidence through the investigator's report and findings, as well as the respondent's own admissions, that the respondents engaged in unlicensed activity by allowing a licensed auctioneer to conduct auctions at their location without obtaining a firm license. So my recommendation was the authorization of a consent order offering 2 options to the respondent. The first option being paying a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000, which would be $500 per violation that I felt I could prove, or offering a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 and requiring the respondent to obtain a firm license within a certain time frame decided by the commission. Because I've seen us offer that in the
Did you
past.
consider finding the auctioneer that did the auction?
We'd have to open a complaint. And so we can add that to the recommendation to open a complaint against that licensed auctioneer as well.
Have to do that because the auctioneer, it's his responsibility to make sure that he's operating in a licensed environment. So I would suggest that you do that.
Motion we accept legal's recommendation on this one, as well as open a complaint against the licensed auctioneer.
Which recommendation?
The total. Giving them the two choices, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
What time frame would you like for them to have to be licensed from the time they sign the consent order?
60 days.
So you're moving that we fine them $3,000 if they do not obtain a firm license, or $1,000 if they obtain it within 30 days?
60.
60 days. Okay. Plus, open up a complaint against the auctioneer. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Morris. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The record show that's unanimous. Number 10.
2017-075-321. The complainant filed a complaint that is very unclear as to what allegations he's making against the respondent. He simply, I just decided to put it in quotes so you could hear the complaint for yourself. It says, I want to know why respondent can run illegal with just an apprentice license by himself, but yet I have the same and I have to pay an auctioneer to be here. He has done it since he started. I've been 3 weeks in a row and he's illegally done it the entire time. That's the entirety of the complaint. Counsel assumes the allegation is respondent is operating without proper licensure because he doesn't provide any further details or documentation to support these vague allegations. The respondent states they are also unsure what the allegations are, but sent us a copy of an active apprentice license for an employee acting as an apprentice there, a copy of their active firm license in the respondent's name, and then a copy of their active auctioneer license for another employee that works there. I verified all those licenses have been active and are active in our system, so my recommendation is dismissal.
Was the apprentice operating without his auctioneer being present?
I don't, there's no information as to what the problem is here, so I don't know.
Is the licensed auctioneer the apprentice's sponsor? Or
I mean, I assume that is the case.
Well, just so you know, you need to check to see who he's apprenticing under, and is his auctioneer there with him while they're doing the auctions. Those are the questions that we need to have further clarification on in this matter.
So would I just send an investigator out to speak to?
You may just call them and ask them.
Just ask, make sure.
And say, you know, who is your sponsoring auctioneer, and is your sponsoring auctioneer present during your auctions? And the answer to those need to be yes to both of those. You know, who it is and is he there? Auctioneer's responsibility for all apprentices is to oversee the apprentice auctioneer.
Not just be there when the auction begins and leave. He needs to be there the entire time to oversee the operation.
The auctioneer has to oversee the entire auction.
I wouldn't think you would have to call anybody. If they sent you all 3 licenses, the auctioneer that was there, we should have documentation on who the sponsoring auctioneer is, correct?
Yeah, and I know when the complaint division opens these, they check that information and will let me know if there's a problem when they send it over to legal. And so there was no issue brought up to me, but going forward now I understand I can verify that. But I can amend my recommendation to say that I'll check these things, and as long as the sponsoring auctioneer is present during the entire auction when the apprentice is conducting it, that it can be dismissed.
If he's not, then
And
there's
if
a
not,
fine.
then
Yeah,
I'll represent it for
there's
discipline.
Yeah, there's a fine involved, yeah.
So your recommendation is you're going to check and make sure that auctioneer is the sponsors, is the apprentice's sponsor, and if it is, it's dismissed. If not, you'll represent it.
With probably a recommendation for discipline.
Is there a motion for that?
So moved. Go ahead.
Commissioner Collier moves.
Second.
Commissioner Morris seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It's unanimous. 11.
I'd like to make a correction to the number that's on your report. It should be 2017074811. The complainant states that he participated in an online auction on September 21st, 2017, held by the respondent to purchase land adjoining land that he owns. He states during the last few hours of the auction, he noticed another bidder begin to rapidly bid on the same parcels that he was bidding on, and it seemed that he was just rapidly bidding to bid up the price, not to purchase it. Complainant states after a considerable amount of research on his part, which he doesn't discuss what research that is, he felt there was a high probability that this bidder was an employee for a respondent that was engaged in shill bidding. The complainant provided a list of all of the usernames that bid during that auction and sent that to us. So I requested that an investigator go out, speak with respondent, and obtain the real names of these bidders on the list the complainant provided. So the investigator did go out and speak to the respondent's owner, and the respondent's owner immediately invoked counsel and stated that this auction was fell under the exception cited in TCA 62-19-103A, which he refers to as the 2006 eBay exemption, and the subsequent legislation passed in the 2017 legislative session. So he did not give the investigator any documents that I requested, and I then spoke with the respondent's counsel. She felt that he didn't have to produce these documents because this was a fixed time online auction that fell under this exemption. So I spoke with the board attorney, with Sarah, about this, and we did agree that it did fall under that exception. So my recommendation is a dismissal of this complaint.
Those are my two questions. Was there any extension of the bidding at all?
No.
And was this an absolute auction?
From memory, I don't think it stated on there it was an absolute auction.
Reserve auction, it kind of changes the parameters a little bit, but again, this is a typical case that we're going to have coming up in front of this board from time to time because of these unregulated online auctions, and we're going to see absolute auction, and then nothing sells, and it's just like, really? So. That would be a follow-up question is, did the property transfer? Or did it stay with the seller?
The last thing that I heard, that property did not sell at all.
Shady deal.
I agree.
If you have any legal recourse against that respondent, I think we need to look at it.
And after Erica and I reviewed it, I don't think that we do.
Moot point.
Yes.
Dismiss it, then. We need to vote, though, don't we? Motion, we accept legal's recommendation to dismiss
Commissioner Lewis moves that we dismiss.
begrudgingly.
Agreed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowe. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It's unanimous. 12.
Information for the
Okay.
complaint we deferred, if you'd like to.
Go back to number 8.
Okay. So,
I lied.
based on the investigator's report for the Motor Vehicle Commission, the respondent told the investigator that he usually videotapes the auctions, but he did not in this case. He mainly videotapes real estate auctions. He adamantly stated that he announces throughout the auction, not just the beginning, that all vehicles, equipment, and miscellaneous items are auctioned off as is, with no warranties express or implied. And that's as much information as I have about that.
Only thing that throws it off is him saying, this vehicle runs. You know, if you're going to make that statement, you got to back it up. Best thing he said, I know nothing about that car. And you can stand behind that. You make your inspections, and it is as is, and all that.
Can I amend my recommendation to a letter of instruction?
You can do anything you want.
I would like to amend my recommendation to authorize a letter of instruction to the respondent.
And if the auctioneer makes false statements from the block, then he is to be held liable for those statements.
Commissioner Morris moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lewis. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Unanimous. Back on track to number 12, I believe.
Yes. And the next two were Robin's cases that I'm going to read on her behalf, and they're both represents, or I'm sorry, number 12 is my represent. 2013-022691. So this was originally presented at the February 3rd, 2014 auctioneer meeting. And this matter was in civil litigation up until the parties entered into an agreed order on October 5th, 2017. The parties dismissed all claims, complaints, and counter complaints with prejudice in Chancery Court. All funds that were held by the court were paid to the respondent. And the complainant agreed to withdraw this complaint from the Auctioneer Commission as part of the settlement. Without more information to prove respondent committed any violations, my recommendation is to now dismiss this complaint.
I move that we accept counsel's recommendation to dismiss this case.
Second.
Commissioner Morris moves to concur with counsel and dismiss. Commissioner Collier seconds. Any further any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Unanimous. 13.
Okay, and these two are Robbins, and they are represents. Number 13 is 2017018841. Do we know when this was? This matter was presented prior to the commission, and it was voted to enter into litigation monitoring order to allow the review on the conclusion of the civil matter. The civil litigation was just dismissed by the complainant. There was no settlement, no findings, and in the original response, respondent denied all allegations regarding this complaint. So without more information, we have to conclude that there were no violations. Therefore, Robin's recommendation is to dismiss this complaint at this time.
I move that we accept counsel's recommendation to dismiss this case.
Second.
Commissioner Morris moves we concur with counsel. Commissioner Collier seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It's unanimous. 14.
2017018861, and this matter involves the same complaint as the one I just summarized. The respondent is the auctioneer firm in this case, and Robin's recommendation is to also dismiss this complaint against the firm.
Accept legal's advice.
Second.
Commissioner Morris, Collier moves to accept legal's advice. Commissioner Morris seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to new business. The anonymous complaints.
As stated before, when we were discussing anonymous complaints, just to kind of revisit that and refresh our memories, that was just, again, we've never referred those, well, we haven't in the past, but recently we want to open up those anonymous complaints, and then, but to do that, we would need the commission's permission and to grant us authority to then close those out. Either way, we're not referring those because we just don't have the information to act on. So if that was the will of the commission, then we'd ask for a motion in that regard.
And can I get just a point of clarity? So if anonymous complaint is filed and we have enough information from a legal standpoint to proceed, it's not just going to be closed just because it's anonymous? Right. Okay, it will go through the normal procedure.
That's correct. If
Okay.
there's information to act on, that's
Okay.
the issue.
I just
You're
want to
correct.
make sure.
That's
You're saying if there's an anonymous complaint and there's not enough information for us to follow up on our own,
It would
then
be
it would be
administratively
immediately
closed.
dismissed and would not be presented to the board.
Correct.
That's a very important point. That makes all the difference in the world. And that's correct. If there's nothing to act on,
Okay.
no
Well,
information to act
Based
on.
on that, I would move that we approve that decision to do that. And I don't know if you need to make that in form of a formal motion or not.
I would assume how that's going to happen is how it's been currently happening with some of the other commissions, is that it'll get sent to me anyway, and I kind of take a first look at it and say yes or no. Because I think they have to have a legal sign-off anyway.
And that with Collection Service Board, cosmetology, and barber. So yes, you probably, if she's been seeing some of those already, then that would be exactly how that would handle. Obviously, administrative, that would encompass the attorneys who are going to be able to review that and to make that determination. Obviously, we do that collectively. That's not going to be just somebody in a corner somewhere just making that decision.
I have a motion on the floor to approve that. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lowe. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It's unanimous. Robert's Rules of Order.
As we know, we've already been using Robert Rules of Order, and if that is the will of the commission to continue doing so, as a matter of housekeeping, we just need to make a motion to do that for this year.
One thing I'd like to say on Robert's Rules of Order, I'm not a guru at Robert's Rules of Order, but I do think that when we have an item, before we can discuss that item, we should have a motion and a second on the floor to properly discuss that item. However, I think the legal report is great to discuss those items before, like we've been doing. So if we go with Robert's Rules of Orders, I'd like to have an exception, if it's the will of the commission, that we can discuss those items before there's a motion on that. Am I right on that, or am I wrong?
We do that with the agenda. Once you've approved the agenda, then you've already motioned to discuss that if it's on the agenda, because you've accepted the agenda in your original motion, and then follow over at your second as well.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay, is there a motion to accept Robert's Rules of Orders?
Motion.
Motion by Commissioner Lewis.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Morris. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Robert's Rules it is. Anything else?
Just going back to the legal portion on the legislative proposals, there was another bill that is out there right now, and it's Senate Bill 2050, House Bill 2133, and it deals with the public auto auctioneer. They are getting rid of that license. So just to give you a summary, it deletes the public automobile auctioneer license. A motor vehicle dealer wishing to sell cars as a public automobile auction must still individually hold an auctioneer license and register with the commission as a public automobile auction. So there will still be a license for public automobile auction, but no longer public automobile auctioneer. They just have to be an auctioneer.
So any auctioneer can do a public automobile auction but they have to have a public automobile auction license.
Yes.
Okay. That's clear as mud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else under new business? Anybody else?
Move we adjourn.
Mr. Morris moves to adjourn. Everybody seconds. All in favor, go home.
Aye.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thanks.